so we can view the recording at a later date. If you are uncomfortable with being recorded and having your name or picture on the screen, then you can drop and then view the recording. I did want to let everybody know that we do also have the chat available on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions during any of the presentations tonight, you can pop your questions in there and somebody will get back to you. Or you can wait till the Q&A portions. We will have one after Graham's session and then also after BlueOrbit. So for the agenda tonight, we are going to do introductions. And then we have the feature updates from November and December for Power BI by Graham. And then we will move on to the feature presentation from Dan and Barath and Sanjay from BlueOrbit, and then Q&A after that as well, and then wrap up. So I guess if anybody wanted to introduce themselves, I know BlueOrbit Solutions, we are going to wait to do your introductions until your session. Did anybody from Tallan want to start?
I could say hi. Welcome everybody. Jared Brown, VP of Data and Analytics at Tallan. Been working with Power BI for half a decade, if not more. At this point, we started this group, a few years ago now. So really excited to see it grow. Getting guest presenters like today is definitely a nice treat. So really looking forward to it. And in terms of what we're hoping to do with this group is exactly what we just described, bring the community together, share ideas, and I guess that's it.
Thanks, Jared.
And I can go next. This is Graham Atkinson. I normally would have my webcam on, but I think that's what was causing me Teams issues. So it's going to have to stay off for the time being. But I am a senior consultant at Tallan. I've been working with Power BI for almost 4 years now. And it's always a new challenge, but always new interesting opportunities. I think the most recent interesting challenge that I've been working on is trying to design reports that are immediately consumable by the public and don't require any sort of knowledge of Power BI or even reporting in general. Just reports that somebody can look at and immediately know what they're looking at and be able to understand it.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. Do any of our attendees want to share?
Hey, I can go. Hey everyone, my name's Casey Philcox. I'm currently working at Travelers as a software engineer. My latest BI challenge, I'm sad to say it, I haven't had a business intelligence challenge in a while. I will say I've been dipping my hands into Click recently at Travelers. So I'm trying to show them how many integration points Microsoft or Power BI has with Office 365 in an effort to have them get Power BI in my machine. But I've been playing around with Click, and it's interesting to see the updates that are within Power BI compared to Click. So nice to meet everybody and see some faces.
Sounds like a future topic to me.
For a guest presenter.
Maybe.
Thanks, Casey. Would anybody else like to share? Going once, going twice.
So my name's Chris. Just got hired by eSimplicity as a data scientist. Before that, I was a machine learning engineer in the space of NLP, natural language programming, for a company called NCI. I mostly work remotely. So I just want to learn more about data visualization tools. There's many out there. Microsoft's Power BI is one of them. So I've just been trying to get into these meetings as much as I possibly can and learn more about how to create dashboards and reports and so forth. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Okay, well, if nobody else wants to jump in and introduce himself, I think we can move on to the first topic, which is the monthly feature updates for the months of November and December. So let me just scroll down here. All right. So for anybody unfamiliar with Microsoft's update policy for Power BI, every month a suite of new features are introduced and posted to a blog that tracks all of those updates. I think every month, excluding the month of January. So we won't have any for this month. And what we have here is the last 2 months, so November and December, and we have just kind of the highest level, most important updates that were listed. There's a whole slew of other kind of minor updates to, for example, connection, custom connectors and connectors to certain data sets, visuals, new third-party visuals, and kind of all sorts of stuff going on underneath the hood. But what we have here is kind of the more important updates that are exciting to talk about. And the first thing on the list is extremely exciting. So under the reporting section, there is a new preview feature in Power BI for a new format pane. And I'd actually like to switch out of the presentation to show that off immediately. Normally, I save all of the kind of demos for the end, but this one's such a big new feature that I just kind of want to talk about it now. So let me switch over to Power BI and show you all what I'm talking about. So before I show it off, let me show you how to enable it for yourself. So if you go into Options and you go into, once this pops up, into the Preview features, which is down here, underneath the Global sections, there is a new format pane right here. And if you click that and then restart Power BI, you will be able to see this as well. And you'll immediately notice a difference when you open it up. Normal Power BI, I actually can't show that. Normal Power BI has the format pane underneath all of the visualizations. And when you click on a blank space in the page or on a visual, you'll see the format options. They have changed that to conserve vertical space. So now we have our build space, which is this tab. And if we click here on the format, we can see we have this new kind of layout, and these are the page formatting options. There's this new icon to indicate that the paintbrush on the page, this is for formatting the entire report canvas. If we click on a visual, that changes to kind of the paintbrush over the bars, showing us that this is now a visual formatter. And then we have this new menu for all of the formatting. The formatting is broken into visual and general, and this is another new change that they've done. Before it was just kind of a long list of different sections within a visual, but now every visual has these general topics that you can interact with. This was a little bit confusing before because each visual had their kind of own unique list, and if you wanted to, for example, change the color or the background, you had to figure out where that was in that specific visual's format settings. Now everything that applies to all visuals is under general, and then the visual specific formatting options are under visual. They've changed the way that you toggle things on and off so that it conserves space. Previously, this toggle would, it would have the word on and off with a large toggle switch, and what that did was actually squish the text so that it would say zoom and then SL ... There wasn't enough to show all of the options. And now, even if we shrink this down or expand our menu, this is actually the minimum width we can go, we can see what all of the options are. So you don't have to hover over options to figure out what they are. And then another really nice feature is we no longer have scroll bars inside of scroll bars. So when we have a menu that goes off the page, there's this scroll bar and we can go up and down the menu. But we no longer have submenus that we have to scroll inside of this longer list. So much easier to interact with. We can open and close submenus. The whole thing is just a whole lot nicer to use, looks nicer, and is more intuitive to figure out where all these options are. They've made a lot of the text in here and a lot of the menu options a whole lot more intuitive, so that you can kind of figure out what you're doing and you don't have to play around to figure out exactly how to make things work. And it's really a change that you appreciate more once you've used it a little bit. It takes a little bit to get used to the format options being up here in the top rather than below every visual. But it's so much easier to use, and there's all sorts of options that weren't available before. You can even revert all of the settings in a visual to their default, which didn't exist before. So if the visual breaks for some reason after you've changed some settings, you don't have to go through and kind of try to figure out what you broke. You can just revert it, and it will go back to its original state. Related to this, they've also moved the analysis visual up here. This is a menu that is not as frequently used, but you can do things like for a bar chart, add a constant line, and for other charts, there's various other analytics things. They've moved that menu to the same place as the format visual. And then to get back to the regular visual builder, it's this button over here. So that was the kind of major change for November, which I have, I've loved it, working through it and with it. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage anybody that is a Power BI developer or a user of Power BI Desktop to enable that preview feature and play around with it yourself. The next change here is the addition of page and bookmark navigators. We actually talked about this in September and October, but the bookmark and page navigators are kind of grouped buttons that when you add them to the report will dynamically expand or shrink depending on how many pages or how many bookmarks you have inside of the report. They will dynamically name themselves to the names of your pages and your bookmarks, and you can format those buttons like any other button. And it's a great way to kind of add some custom navigation that isn't just the normal Power BI page navigation inside of the report. We also now have the ability to sort legends in every type of chart that supports legends. So previously, if you have a bar chart, you could sort that bar chart by a count or a sum or alphabetically. You could sort the actual bars in any way that you wanted, but if you had a legend added to that, you would not be able to sort the order of that legend. You could control that kind of in the back end by adding a sort order to the column of your legend, but then you can't control whether or not it's ascending or descending. You would have to do some function of like inverting the sort order if you wanted to sort a certain way. It was a whole pain to just get your legend to display the way that you wanted. And they've added some improvements to that. It's still not, you can still only sort it by the actual column that is your legend. So you can't say sort a legend based on a sum of some other field. But now you can choose to sort that, and you can sort it ascending or descending. They have added bold, italic, underline, superscript, subscripts, and bulleted lists all to the text boxes that you can insert into a Power BI report. So I had that up on Power BI. We can see in this text box, we now have all of these options. Previously, there was a font size. You could do a little bit of formatting. You could change the color, you could change the weight, and you could change the alignment. But now you can do superscript, subscripts, bulleted lists. Just gives you a whole bunch more control over how you have your text display inside of a text box. Excuse me for 1 second, my mouse has frozen. All kinds of technical difficulties here. Okay. In addition to that, they have added a rotation option to pie and donut charts. This is kind of a minor adjustment, but to me, this is actually quite exciting. I might as well show that one off too. So here we have a donut chart in Power BI, and underneath the visual options in format, we have this new section called rotation. Now, the way that the donut chart previously worked in Power BI is by default, it was set to 0 degrees of rotation. And starting from the exact top center of the visual, you would have your largest segment, followed by your second largest, third largest, and fourth largest. Now you can choose where that rotation begins. So if we don't want that largest segment to start at the top middle, we can change it to 90 degrees. Now this is fairly minor. You can use this to have the smaller sections appear in a different place than the top left of the visual every time. But there's some rather interesting things that this also opens the door for. I kind of put together this little bit of more of a deep dive into the usage of donut charts. Something that I've been playing around with for a while now is better gauges within Power BI. So Power BI has gauges as an out-of-the-box visual that we can use. And gauges really don't have much formatting that you can do. If you want to rotate a gauge, you're kind of out of luck. It's always going to be this, horizontal from left to right gauge. You can only fill from the left. You can only set a minimum and a maximum value. You're very limited on your formatting options. But enabling us to rotate donut charts actually gives us a lot of control over turning a donut chart into a gauge. So I'll quickly show you what I mean by that. Here I have a single segment out of the total segments built out of a donut chart. If I move this, I'll show you it is a donut chart. There's another segment over here that I have hidden. And I'm able to do this now because I can choose the rotation. So I'm rotating this 180 degrees to put the blank piece actually behind this kind of blocker. And there's kind of all sorts of things that you can choose to do with that. But this is something that I've wanted to do in the past and have been prevented from doing. And now you can have a whole lot more control over making kind of advanced visuals. This is not a standard use case. Turning a donut chart into a gauge is not something that you would need in every report, but having the control to do that if you choose to is always nice. All right, switching back over here. They say that they have added a scorecard visual into Power BI, and it's supposed to be available out of the box. Now, I was not able to find that visual in Power BI. It may be because you are required to have a premium license to use it. Not exactly sure why I wasn't able to use it and show it off. But what this is supposed to do is show you all of the goals that you have set up in the Power BI service and kind of create this nice scorecard layout where you can see how all those goals are tracking without having to go into the Power BI service to the goals section. You are allegedly also supposed to be able to control goals and edit those goals within that visual. But again, I wasn't really able to explore that because their documentation on it was not very fleshed out. And I was not able to find the scorecard visual. Now,
Graham, I could chime in. Yeah, so the goals feature is a premium feature. I think there's ways to, like, if an individual wants to try it out, there is like a sample that you could play around with. Doesn't come into the scorecard, doesn't cover the scorecard visual itself, but there is a low barrier to entry for premium with premium per user. It's just an extra $10 a month if folks want to try that out. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions about it specifically, but there's a couple ways to maybe get access.
Great, thanks, Jared. Okay, and the next section here for November is updates to the service. Most of these are fairly minor, but underneath the admin and governance, they have made several improvements to the datasets hub. The datasets hub is where you would go into the service and see all of the datasets that are feeding reports within a workspace. Don't have a complete list of the improvements, but they're all fairly minor, and this is something that they've been kind of improving month to month. If you are interested in specific details, you can always visit the Power BI blog and check all of the updates for yourself. They have also added Azure Lockbox support for Power BI. And what this is a way to kind of secure your data from Microsoft. If a Microsoft personnel ever needs to access your server for some operation that you cannot do, that you would need Microsoft to do from the back end, you can use Azure Lockbox to make sure that only authenticated actions can occur. So this is kind of a level of security that is probably not necessary in most organizations, but they have now implemented support to implement that if needed. And then the last section for the month of November is the Power BI goals. So these kind of go alongside that scorecard visual that I mentioned. There is a whole section within the Power BI service. As Jared said, you do need the premium license to use it. And you can now set user group permissions on goals so that only users within a certain role can change and set goals and see specific goals. They have added integration with Power Automate into goals, and then they've added the capability to kind of change the layout of the scorecard of goals so that you can move goals around. And now when the next user comes in, they'll see the goals and the layout that you've chosen. So fairly minor improvements there, but that is kind of an area that they're trying to develop and push to be on par with the rest of the service experience. So that's all that we have for November. Any questions on those before I move on to December?
So how do you load the data in this Power BI? You just go to File and Load? Is it I haven't used this in a while.
Yes. Yeah, how about I do a quick demo of that after I go over the December updates. I will just bring up the Power BI desktop and walk you through that.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
All right. So heading over to December, there's a relatively short list here, just a few important updates. And the first one is actually quite interesting. They've now added Sparklines as a preview feature. This is another thing that you'd have to go into those preview settings and enable. But here I have a screenshot of what you can kind of accomplish with the Sparklines. You can think of the Sparklines as small multiples. If you're familiar with that, we've talked about that a bit in the past. But it's a way to kind of show your data in a line chart or a bar chart without making it like a fine granularity of detail. It's kind of, it's so that you can observe a trend, but you wouldn't do it for data where you want to be able to like hover over a day or a single data point and see what the data is. And you can add now a Sparklines column to both a matrix and a table. And then you have a few ways to customize how that Sparkline looks. So I'll show that off after I'm done with going over the rest of this page. But a rather exciting feature that in the past you've kind of been able to do by loading an image into a table, but now they've made it quite easy to do that. And then also under the reporting section, so in the November updates, they introduced the format pane. In December, they made a few changes to it. So not really important to go over those specific changes, but they're continuing to work on it. They're taking feedback from the community and continuing to improve it. And then over here under the service section for December, a few more minor changes. They have allowed email subscriptions to be accessible via the API. So now you can set email subscriptions or revoke through the admin API. You can with the shareable links from reports. So once you're viewing a report on the service and you generate a link to share with somebody else, you can now do that in such a way where the link that you're sharing will include personal changes that you've made to the report. So like setting filters, making personalization changes to visuals, drilling down or drilling into data, and like the report page that you're currently viewing. All of those things you can kind of preserve in a link that you're sharing with somebody else to view. The next section here, or the next bullet point, I should say, is a public preview of hybrid tables in Power BI Premium. This is a very exciting topic. So hybrid tables are tables that are a combination between import and direct query. And this has been something that's kind of been in the works, but it is now available as a public preview. I have not had the opportunity to play with this, but the concept is extremely interesting. Previously, you had to kind of choose between whether or not you want to import all your data or have all of your data directly query the source. And of course, both have pros and cons. Import mode, it's going to be snapshotted to a certain time. It's not going to be live data, but the performance will be the fastest because you are only querying the data when you refresh the table or refresh the data set within Power BI. And that would usually only happen once or a few times each day. With direct query or live connection, the context is constantly changing as the viewer is looking at the report, and every time the context changes, so every time the viewer goes to a new page or clicks on a piece of data to filter the rest of the report or scrolls down in the table and loads new data, the queries would be repeated and you would get the live or most updated data from the data source. So now you have a way to combine both of those so that some of your data is imported and is always in the report and doesn't need to be loaded, doesn't need to be queried until you choose to refresh it. And then some of your data is going to be live so that, say, you can have a context that is the most up-to-date version of the data as possible. Again, I didn't get a huge amount of time to play around with it or put together an example, but very exciting kind of new preview that they enabled in December. And then our final bullet point is for deployment pipelines. This one is also very interesting. I think, trying to remember, I think specifically, Casey, this will be exciting to you. Deployment pipelines, you can now choose workspaces for each of the stages of the deployment process. So previously, you would have to, Power BI would automatically provision for you each of the 3 workspaces. So you would create like a dev workspace, and you'd say, I want to make this into a deployment pipeline, and Power BI would automatically create for you a test workspace and a production workspace. Now you can designate which workspaces you want to be your dev, test, and production workspaces. So you can, have an already existing workspace that you say, I actually want this to be the production, and I want this other workspace to be the test. It just gives you a much tighter grain of control over the deployment process and what workspaces are existing within your environment in the service. Now, deployment pipelines are more of an advanced topic. I won't dive now into kind of how they work. So kind of if you've used it before, you might appreciate this new feature. If not, not really something to delve into now, but they are an interesting feature available to deploying and governance within Power BI. Now, if anybody has any questions on any of those, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'm going to dive into a quick demo of Sparklines, and then I will talk about loading data into Power BI.
Graham, I do have connectivity to a goals and scorecard environment if we want to show that briefly too, but I'll let you do your thing first.
Okay, sure. I'll turn it over to you then after I'm done Just showing off a little bit of what I put together. I keep bringing that up. I should not bring that up. Okay, so let's head over to Sparklines here. So I've put together a quick matrix. The data that I'm using here, by the way, is the public test data available in Power BI. If you load up a brand new Power BI report and do not click Get Data, there's kind of a watermark that says Load the Test Data Set. And if you click on that, you can connect directly to this kind of public data set provided by Microsoft. So I have that loaded in here. So this is not real data, but we can see that underneath each country, we have products, and those products have a profit amount. And then next to that profit amount, we have a sparkline indicating over time the profits for that product within that country. So you can see this is, rather valuable. I've marked in each one of these the highest point, and you can kind of get an idea of, how over time each one of these products has performed within each country. To add this, what I did was first add a, let's see, what should I add? Let's add units sold. First add a column to the matrix. And then if I click on the little drop down here, there's a new button to add a sparkline. So you click the add a sparkline, and you want to see, I want to see units sold, and the summarization here is going to be a sum across, and now you're going to pick, this is usually going to be a date, but it doesn't always have to be. So we want to see the units sold by date. And if I click create, it'll add a new column telling me units sold by date, and we'll see this sparkline kind of roughly echoes the profit by date sparkline. We'll see when this increases, usually the profits are also increasing. Now, if I head over to the format, there's this new section for sparklines. This appears once you've added the first sparkline to a visual. If I go in here and choose which sparkline I want to format, so I'll do my new sparkline, I can now play around with the formatting for this sparkline. So I have two options for the chart type. I can make it columns. Can be useful in some scenarios. Looks a bit busy here. Or I can make it a line chart. I can choose the color. I can choose the width of the line. And I can do things like adding markers to the line. So right now there are no markers selected, but I could have a marker at the highest point, so I could see over time the most units sold. I could look at the lowest, the first, last, negative values. I can even look at every single point if for some reason I wanted to do that. And then of course you can control the marker color, the marker size, what the marker looks like, typical Power BI formatting. So kind of a huge amount of options that you can now add to your tables and your matrices. I think this is kind of a supremely useful new preview feature that I can't believe wasn't already available, and I'm very happy to see that it now is. So that's the last thing that I wanted to talk about on Sparklines and in terms of updates. So I guess I will quickly just talk a little bit about importing data, how to get data into Power BI, since there was a question on that. So when you boot up Power BI, you will be prompted with a splash screen that asks you what you want to do. Usually the first thing that you click on is get data, because there's not much to do in Power BI if you don't have any data. So I can't bring up that splash screen now because I already have the application open. But there's also, you can click get data, and you can get data in the file menu as well. So any one of those buttons will bring you to the same get data dialog box here, which will come up in a second.
It supports like all formats, text, CVS files.
Yep.
Microsoft. Okay.
Yeah, there's over 100 connectors at this point, including like general, OData, endpoints. So you really have a lot of flexibility, even if there isn't a native connector.
Yeah. So this dialog box will open. You can click like a simple one, like from an Excel workbook or whatever, if you don't want to go through this whole dialog, if you know exactly what it is. But as Jared said, there's hundreds and hundreds of connectors, and they're constantly adding more. The most used ones are usually from Excel, from like a JSON, text CSV, or like a database. But if you're using something specific, like for example, Snowflake, you can type in here and say you want to connect to a Snowflake data source. And each connector is built to work with whatever third-party application you have your data stored in. I won't go through the process right now of actually doing that connection, but once you load the data, you then have the opportunity to make transformations. And those transformations happen within the Power BI data model, not the native data model. So any changes you make won't be reflected in the source. And then after you've made those transformations, the data will load into Power BI, and you'll get something that looks a little bit like this, where you have all of your tables. Right now I have a single table imported called financials, and within that financials table, I have a number of fields. And each one of those fields represents a column in that table. So very, very basics of getting Power BI getting data into Power BI. There's a whole lot of other things that you can do along the way, transformations and querying and relationships and modeling. Won't get into that now, but it's a whole nother can of worms. But I think that's going to do it for general updates. So Jared, if you want to talk quickly about that goal setting within the Power BI service.
Yeah, I'll cover this very quick. Hope everybody can see my screen. So one thing to mention, so we actually have access to a tenant with a premium workspace, and you may see this goals thing in your environment, but you may not have access to do too much with it. One thing you can do even in a tenant without premium access is click on these samples, and you can see what the goals are all about. I mean, you have these groups of goals with sub goals. You get a general idea of whether or not you're on track, what the target is, and what progress you're making towards them. I mean, honestly, this is kind of a new concept to kind of replace what maybe dashboards were originally intended to be in Power BI. So it's a pretty powerful capability. You could see comments. You could look at these and see people that have checked in against the different goals, comments that are made, quite a bit of information. This was only in the Power BI service until recently, but now with the Scorecard Visual and Power BI Desktop, once you enable this preview feature, it's going to say I could create a new one or connect to an existing scorecard. I'll connect to an existing one and just pick the one that I have out there. And essentially the same exact experience you saw in the Power BI service. You could come in and check in against these goals here, and even add new goals or sub goals if I go into like edit mode. So add sub goals, add goals. As far as what these KPIs you're measuring yourself against, these could be just data points from KPIs or gauges or bar charts on any of your reports. You can kind of mark them as an element to track as a goal, or you could put arbitrary values in here if you want to add something that is a little bit more a little less quantifiable in terms of data sets you have access to. So pretty straightforward, and that's about it. All right. Anybody have any questions for Graham or myself or any other?
When will the goals go from preview to live? Do you know?
I'm sorry, when is the goals feature going to be live?
Yes.
So the goals feature in the Power BI service is live now. The goals custom visual, or the goals visual in Power BI desktop is in preview. So here, let me share again real quick. So if you go kind of like Graham described into options and settings, and Casey put a screenshot of this in the chat. If you go under preview features, there's a scorecard option you can opt into. It makes you restart, but that's how you turn this on. So you can try it out.
I'm referring to the one online. It says goals, and then next to it says preview. So I've been working with the scorecards and creating goals, but I'm worried about creating too much and then going to live.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and actually another topic I could just briefly touch on. One thing that Microsoft made recently available, if you go into Apps, Get App, and you can scroll for it or search for release, there's this new, I gotta sign up. Hold on, I have another version of this already open, so stand by. This app basically gives you a picture of the Microsoft release plan. So I don't know if it'll be here or not, but this is what that app looks like after you sign up for it. And if I say goals, maybe it will tell me. So it looks like no mention of when goals is going to be GA, but let's go and look at this page and see if it mentions it here. So they do not have an answer for you, unfortunately, when it's going to be GA.
I was clicking around looking in there at the documentation, and I didn't see anything. Thank you.
Yep. No. Great. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Good point. But as you can see, this gives a list of all the features over time, and when they're preview, GA, released. A lot to look for in March too. So stay tuned. All right. If there's no other questions, Gina, I don't know if you're moving us into the next stage or if you want Graham or I to, but. Okay. All right. Well, I guess I will do that since I was presenting last. I think our plan is to move to the main event. Dan, Barath, and maybe Sanjay from BlueOrbit Solutions are going to be presenting today. So I guess with no further ado, we'll hand it over to them.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll kick it off here. Let me just put this in projector mode. What we're going to do is a little introduction of myself, Sanjay, and Barath. We're all from BlueOrbit. And then as far as agenda, we're going to talk tonight about, creating a modern UX UI design. And, it's something that I find, because I'm, a data analyst, I hardly ever get into. But as I've started to pay more attention to design and UX, not only with software, it's become a topic that I'm very interested in. So we're going to talk about that at a high level. Then we'll do, we're going to actually do a deep dive into dashboard examples and use cases. And then I have some resources that hopefully will get you started. So why don't we first do introductions. Sanjay and Barath, you guys want to go first, and then I'll finish it up and then start.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Hello, everyone. I'm Sanjay Goradia. I'm a president and CTO of BlueOrbit Solutions. I've been in BI analytics space for more than 25 years and worked with a variety of BI tools and then data visualization tools, and have delivered hundreds of solutions, including in the leading visualization tools like Click, Tableau, and Power BI. But most recently, for the last 5 years, our company has been more focusing on delivering solutions using Power BI, and you will see some of them during the demo today. And one of the area also we have specialized is in the migration space. So I'm a migration visionary, and then we talk more about that. But we have been helping customers move to this Power BI platform as well. So look forward to presenting you today a case study on one of our customer engagement where we delivered a modern analytic dashboard. Over to Barath.
Thank you, Sanjay. Good evening, everyone. This is Barath here. I have been with INAI for more than 3 years now, and I have been leading solution development and product management for INAI, which is a sister firm for BlueOrbit Solutions. Prior to this, I have an experience in solution design as well as management consulting, and I have an experience of more than 15 years across multiple geographies in the world. You can reach out to me for any questions on the way we develop the solutions and the end product for every user.
Great, thanks. So my name's Dan Hughes, Senior Director of Solutions. My background is primarily around project leadership. Helped many companies design and develop a data warehouse from the ground up. Built several data warehouses from ground up, and then also working with the end users to deliver data through data visualization tools. So I've worked with a bunch of the different tools, Qlik, Power BI, and Tableau. So all three of us are hands-on people. We're very much into details. And so when we do this presentation today, hopefully you'll see that we're going to get into some real details. As far as questions, feel free to ask along the way. If there's anything urgent that you need to, you really need us to pause, feel free to do that. Just raise your hand and ask the question, and there'll be some folks monitoring. Okay, so let's get started here. I know I definitely don't want to sell our company here, but just give you a couple key points. Founded in 2010, Sanjay mentioned, we're focused on helping develop modern analytics experience. So not just report writers, we believe we bring a lot more to that. Worked on lots of projects and engagements. We are certified gold Microsoft partner. We have a framework for building Power BI and embedding it into wraparound portal type technology, so we can create a unified visualization. And then we have a library of different components, and just from all of our experiences working in both the private sector and public, we've just gathered a lot of ways of representing data that we think can be shared to other companies. So it's a little bit about us. So let's get into so let's talk about UX UI. I personally never really understood UX and UI and what the difference was. Most of us who get into data visualization are analytical people. We're not really creative people. We tend not to be, and we don't realize it, but we really are in the business of providing a user experience. But it's kind of a secondary thing. But what we've all realized is the importance of creating very, very useful, beautiful experiences for our customers. And it's a mega trend now, and we will see more and more teams, including UX, UI, and creative people on those teams, because it's becoming that big of a deal. Users are demanding a better experience, and we'll have to deliver that, and we'll have to readjust the teams. So just level setting everybody's understanding, user experience comes before user interface. So that's the first key thing, is user experience has to do with researching your customer, making sure all the data is going to be available, doing prototypes and wireframing, actually creating different scenarios, sitting down with the customer, trying to really put yourself into the customer's seat. Once a user experience is defined, and that's based on roles and a whole bunch of things, that's when a UI can be created. And the UI is where most of us operate, any of us who build dashboards or advise on that. But the UI is only relevant for digital products. So that's the first thing. UX can be relevant to products as well as software. UI is only software. It's only a digital solution. And so that UI deals with visual design and colors and layouts and topography, really understanding, what we're presenting to the user and can they navigate it, can they see and touch it and get to what they need. So that's the first step, is separating and understanding there are two things at play here, and each one has principles and disciplines within them, and they can be learned by technical people. You don't have to be a Johnny Ives artistic guy from, who's one of the great designers of products who work for Apple. We don't have to be Johnny Ives. We can learn some of these principles and at least be aware that we can create a better user experience by following some of these and practicing, of course. So here's the UX. The full definition is UX encompasses all aspects of the user's interaction with the company or department. And so part of the user experience is dealing with you guys. How easy is it to deal with the developers? The business analysts who define the requirements. Is it difficult and painful, or is it a really nice experience? So that's the first step, is knowing that when we talk about user experience, it's how we interact with the customer, how we gather requirements, how we understand their world, and how we support them. And then second, collaboration, right information, ease of use, and help. Does it deliver on expectations? So the example I have here is a car, and on the left side we have a standard modern Chevy, and on the right side we have a modern Tesla. Now, both provide a user experience, but anyone who's driven a Tesla will say that user experience delights them and it exceeds expectations. So the user experience is actually using the car, but the user interface is really only the digital aspects of this car. So because Teslas are all digital, it's all user interfaces. This car here and a dashboard, this is all considered UI. In this car, the only thing that's UI is right here, this screen here, because that's the digital. So user experience and a UI, I think Tesla and Apple are the epitome of creating, user experiences and using great UI for those. Example of user interface, right there, UI is what the user interacts with, the look and feel and interactivity of a digital product, the cosmetics of the product, right? Color, spacing, grids, all the things that we spend a lot of time, widgets that we select, gauges, however we choose to represent the data. But UI can be super functional and usable at one point, but then is no longer usable anymore. So the BlackBerry was the hottest product out there. It had a great user experience and it had a great user interface. However, technology evolved, and then the first Apple came along, and Jobs said, I only want one button. Of course, they ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons, but the point being is it created a beautiful user experience, and the user interface was unlike anything we had ever seen before. And so it supplanted this user interface. So a lot of our dashboards were designed using techniques and methods and an understanding of the customer that may not be valid now. So it's really important to understand this stuff evolves, and although you have great stuff at one point, we need to continue to modernize it. So that's just level setting everybody on UX UI. Just a couple key things, core components of UX UI, the wireframe, of course, creating samples, prototypes. That's a huge part of user experience. Information architecture, making sure the right data is there. It's high quality data. It's data that's actually useful. It allows them to drill down right into details to get further to answer questions. So that's information architecture. Visual design, we all have been doing that. Usability, we really have to focus on making sure the stuff is user friendly and people can get, we like to say, can you get an answer in 3 clicks? And can we get the result back in sub 6 seconds, right? There's a lead time. Once the query goes beyond a certain number of seconds, people get frustrated. So being aware of what that is and making sure that in our usability, and then interaction design, super important with colors and making sure we pay attention to color blindness and just not making it too busy. So that's just some core components. So just a couple quick things, and then we're going to get really into the details here. Jacob Nielsen is somebody who he writes a lot on UX and UI, and I would encourage anybody who's really interested in this topic. I have some resources at the end, and you can dive in. And definitely his work, his videos, all this stuff is super great. And there's 10 principles for good design. Just in the interest of time, I'll just go through these quickly. You know, visibility is system status, right? When was the data last updated? That's really important to users. Making it easy to understand if we're waiting for data to return, making sure that there's a visual cue. Number 2, match between system and real world. Don't use jargon that is not understandable for the end user. It's really important to use plain English and simplicity and just state what the user's expecting to see in language that the user understands. Number 3, just allowing users to be free and be able to do lots of, have control. Don't lock them down so much where they don't have a lot of interaction, and allow users to ask questions of the data and get different results back. Standards is another one. Error prevention. If you can think ahead of the time what some of the errors could be, try to come up with ways to mitigate those errors. Then it's just aesthetics, and then help. This is a good one. Number 9, make sure if help is required or definitions of terms, incorporate that into the design and allow the user to quickly go to a reference and get information that may define terms or say calculations, right? We create calculations all the time, but what are the definitions of that calc? Well, we can incorporate using help. We can define what those definitions are and make that part of the design. So just a really good resource here for just getting good principles. So let's dive in. We're going to get into the details now. So this is all about creating. Our main goal is to create usefulness, is to create dashboards that are useful. And useful is utility plus usability. So great features plus usability, easy to use, that creates something that's useful. On the UX side, quality of data, completeness of information, good support, ease of access, pleasing to use, users feel understood and they feel good. And then on the UI side, summing it up, easy to navigate, layout, minimum clicks, right choice of visuals, minimalist layout, try to use less ink. That's a term that Stephen Few created years ago. Try not to clutter it with lots of details. If the graph explains what it's trying to communicate, then you don't need to label it, and then help include it. So I have some examples here, just to start to really get in here. If anybody has any questions, please raise them, and we'll be happy to take a pause and maybe address something if you have something you really want to talk about. So this is a basic Power BI dashboard, and you can see all the different components that have been placed in the dashboard. And so if we were going to improve this dashboard, what's one of the ways we could do it? And now we're focusing on the UI as well as the UX here, assuming that we've done our research and we understand what the user's needs are, and we understand where they're coming from, and we understand industry trends and things like that. Let's assume that this COVID analysis is right. Well, we can take it and we can, first of all, most users, when users look at something, they navigate from top left, down, over to the right, down. And so we want to put our most important information on the top left, because that's where the user's eyes are going to go. Another best, so I've basically taken this area, which is the menu, separated that because those are the drivers of the actual dashboard. Then on the top, a best practice is to put KPIs up on the top. And so I'm labeling this to KPI bar. And, you know, in this case, big, bold numbers that the user will understand and that is meaningful and useful for the user. In this example here, we're just talking about COVID. And so the number of countries, how many had confirmed, recovered, deaths, active. Now, we don't have intelligence in here saying, well, what was the rate of change from the prior month or the prior year? We, of course, could fit that in there. So there's more intelligence, which some of our other examples have. And then this section here is the general section. And this is where we put our widgets and, you know, our graphs and charts and tables and how we organize those. And some of this general section can be driven, you know, by KPIs. I mean, we could have a click here that drives the actual visuals inside the general section. So that's an example of separating the dashboard out and breaking it into its components and then starting to work on it. And so this is the final view of it. And this is Design Mind. They did this, and I think they did a great job. Notice how, so on the left here, we got rid of all the long list and created drop downs, which are a lot easier to work with for the user. It's a lot easier in the eye. We also made the date a lot easier to adjust. We also created a back button. So, right, how many times have users gotten in a jam and they want to be able to go back to the original dashboard? By putting a button in here and using a bookmark, we can rotate back to, back to the original report. So we're giving the user an exit to start over. We also have some buttons here that will change the actual visuals that are in this general section. So we could click on map, and then a map takes up the entire general information area. So we're using the same real estate, but we're driving it on 3 different ways of looking at data within the general information. So that's another useful thing for the users. It's big, it's bold, it's self-explanatory. And then, of course, up here, we separate it. You'll notice that we took each of the graphs and created a dark contrasting background and then separated each of the visuals here. And it just calls it out. And then, of course, we have our tabular view here. So that's just a very simple way of taking a basic dashboard and applying some of the principles for good user interface, which a lot of these are, but even with experience, we want the users to approach the dashboards and for it to be a nice experience for them. So that's one example there. Anybody have any questions? I'll pause here before we get into we have a use case for K-12 school district we're working with, where Barath has done some really great work. Anybody have anything you want to throw out or any experiences? Okay. All right. So Barath, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you want to take it from here and just let me know, I'll drive the PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Good evening again, everyone. I don't want to make it a monologue, so at any point of time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me and ask me, and I'll be very happy to answer those questions. So what we are going to look over the next few minutes is how in our company we apply the concepts that Dan just spoke about, and how we come up with dashboards that are really interesting, and our customers really appreciate those dashboards. There is no one right way of doing things, so we are just going to discuss our approach of doing things, which has worked well so far for us. And I'm just going to elaborate various steps and nitty-gritties of things that we deal with. So over here, what you see is our approach to how we go for modern UX and UI. So we always try to build our analytics around what user needs. There are two ways of doing reporting. One is take all the data that is there, build reports out of the data, whatever is available, and share them with the users, allow them to pick whatever they need. That is one way of looking at things. The other way which we do is business-led analytics, where we try to identify what the user needs, analyze the data, and see what data would be helpful for the users and how can we present that data in the best possible formation so that the users can make effective decision making. So that's our approach. We start ground up from the user's perspective. So that's where it is business-led analytics. So what we generally do is we try to identify all the KPIs and metrics that would be useful for a particular user group. We always try to create dashboards for a particular role, for a particular user rather than for a community. So we start with what can we help the user achieve out of the data that is available. Those are the questions that we form, which becomes the core for the dashboard. And then with the data that is available, we try to form data stories, which will help answer those questions that we are presenting to them. And then we create the visualizations and the user experience follows that. So the visualization is trying to unfold a story, something like a book. Instead of having everything on a single page, we start at a highest level, but at the same time allow the user to drill down to the level of details that they would want to see and not restricting them to the data that is that we are presenting. So we usually use a 3-click approach where a user would be able to get to the last level of details within 3 clicks. So that's what we try to do, and we try to achieve out of our visualization experience. Okay, can we go to the next slide, Dan? Yeah. So this is for all the people who are on the engineering side of data or on the architecture side. This is to just to give a snippet of how we are dealing with multiple sources. This doesn't have much to do with UX UI, but this is just to give a perspective of how our data architecture looks like. Again, we are taking K12 as a sample, but we work with multiple industries. In this case, we have more than about 20 different sources of data that we put together on cloud and then mash up together to bring in the analytics that we show. And I will show you some examples down the line on the slides. So just very briefly, we have student data, we have the school data, we have staff data, student performance data, assignments, online learning management, and then a lot of online activity, given that most of the students are in remote. So their meeting data, their application usage data, what kind of data they are browsing, etc. And we take all this data together and store it in cloud. We are completely cloud-based organization. So we store this on cloud. And from there, we create something called an information layer, which has curated data sets. Now, what these curated data sets help is they are stored in a certain way that would help the users answer the business questions that they have. So which students are having lower attendance, for an example, or what group of students are not performing so well. So typically where the user needs to focus, those are the data that is available on the curated data sets. And then we finally have the flattened KPI layer, which has only the metrics that we show on the front end on Power BI or Tableau or on our own framework. And we typically store a flattened layer for faster processing of the data on the front end, which keeps the UI very light and the responsiveness is very, very high. So that's the reason we use a flattened KPI layer. Any questions so far? Okay, Dan, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so next, what I'm going to talk about role-based dashboards. As I introduced in the beginning, we keep users on the forefront in anything that we do. And for any particular data set, we believe that there are multiple dashboards that can be created. It could be the same data, but it could be presented in so many different ways that are relevant to so many different roles. And the user could get the relevant analysis that they need. So we strongly believe that one size doesn't fit all. A same seed data could be presented in different ways for different users, and that in a large way contributes to the user experience that they have. So instead of searching for the data that they want, it right in front of them and in a way that would help them perform their duties better. So all of you over here might know that analytics is always a support group. It is not a core functionality for most of the business users, and it analytics always supports the business users to perform their role better, and we just help to achieve that objective for the users, and that in a big way contributes to the user experience that they have when they access the application or the dashboards that we present to them. So as I spoke, we create targeted role-based dashboard which enable decision making. So decision making is the key. We always create the dashboards which help them make better decisions when they see the data. And we have different levels of dashboard for different users. So I'm going to give some example over here, which is there on the bottom section of the screen. So I have taken 3 roles for an example, and we are also going to see in the subsequent slides some dashboards that we have created, some screenshots, and I'm going to walk you through in detail about them. So first is the executive, the one who is at a CXO level, who needs to look after the organization health at an overall level. He or she may want to know the data from a 30,000 feet level, but not necessarily at operational level managing day-to-day activities. So they are responsible for strategic decision making. They usually do long-term planning. And for those kind of users, we provide dashboard which provide organizational health indicators. So we expect these users to view the dashboard not more than once in a week, typically once in a month. Whenever they have those planning sessions, these dashboards help them know where the organization is doing in terms of the goals that they have set for themselves and what are the corrections that they could do. So that's what we try to address. The next is a manager level who typically reports to the executive, who is responsible for tactical decision making. And usually these kind of roles, they perform medium term planning. So they have the goals that are provided to them by the executive, and they need to churn up the goals at a faster rate compared to an executive, but they are more medium term. So for these kind of users, we provide goal-based metrics. They have their goals, and the metrics are directly trying to address how the user is performing as far as the goal is concerned. Okay, and the last is a team member, a lowest level team member. They are responsible for operational decision making, typically day-to-day activities. The dashboards that we provide to them help them in performing their daily tasks better. Like, for example, is the water coming in today properly? Are we consuming enough electricity, or are we consuming the right amount of food? How much of food wastage is there, or how many kids are not having bus facility today because of driver absenteeism, things like that. So for those kind of users, we provide real-time stats which help them quickly understand where the gaps are for the day and then take appropriate decisions to handle those scenarios. Okay. All right. Dan, can we go over to the next slide? Okay, so before I start, any questions so far on what I just covered? We are going to look at examples right now of what I just spoke. So I have few dashboards for each of the roles that I just spoke about, and we are going to look at in detail in each of them. But any questions so far? All right, I will take that as a no. So superintendent, the superintendent is typically the highest level member on school district. He or she runs the school district, and I have listed some of the responsibilities out here. So they implement the school board's vision. They set goals for the school district. They do strategic planning for the school district.
Did we lose Barath, or is that?
I think so. It's frozen on my end too.
I didn't know if that was me or not.
Yeah, nice.
He just moved.
Okay. Yeah. What just happened? Sorry.
Barath, we lost you for maybe 20 seconds.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so I was talking about the responsibilities of superintendent. So yeah, so we start with the responsibilities that the role would have. I have outlined some of the responsibilities out here. So if you look at these, none of these are like things that the user needs to perform at a day-to-day level. They have a broader responsibility, so to set the goals for the district, to know where the district are, to increase the achievement level of the students. So what we do over here, if you look at the first screen, which is on the left-hand side, we have the various modules for the user, which starts from district at a glance. That's the screen that you see. Then we have strategic view. We have the strength and weakness view, which helps the user understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. We have a student performance view because ultimately a school district is for the students. We have the student performance, which provides an aggregate view of the student performance, indicating how well the students in the district are doing, and the other pages are there which will have like human resources details, fiscal details, etc. So this page on the left is, if you see, there are like 5 tiles on the bottom. One is related to enrollment, which is the most important thing for the school district, which drives the revenue for the school district. So that we are providing details on that. And then from an equity perspective, how is the composition of the students? Are we having the right mix of students? Are we encouraging all the different types of students to participate or join the school district? Then of course we have the staffing. How is the student to staff ratio? Are we maintaining a healthy balance of that? Are we having enough qualified teachers? So those are the details over there. And then from a school's perspective, how many high schools are there? How many middle schools? How many elementary? How many schools that are addressing special needs and chartered schools, etc. And then from a fiscal perspective, where are we spending? What are our revenue sources? Are we spending enough with respect to the budget that we have set for ourselves, and are we getting all the revenue sources that we need to get? So providing like a 30,000 feet view of the school district at a glance to quickly know how the health of the school district is. The next page on the right is a goals and strategy page. This is going to be very key for the superintendent. Now, every organization sets their own strategic plan. They set a three-year plan. They set a 5-year plan, and every plan will have goals associated to that. Now, what happens is if the goals are not measured for the progress, then those goals itself mean nothing. So what we try to do is we work with the organization, in this case, the school district. We try to come up with KPIs, metrics that would help the superintendent understand how well the school district is doing for that particular goal that has been set for that school district. So on the top, the band that you see is the list of all the different goals that the school district has for themselves. And in this case, we have elaborated for 100% attendance, which is in white. And it gives a quick summary of how much money we have spent towards achieving that goal. How much have we spent compared to the budget? So that gives a perspective to the superintendent. And it also gives an achievement rate, which is based on the multiple metrics that we have for that particular goal. So whether we are 80% or 70% or just 30%. And on the bottom, we have the outcomes for that particular goal. We have different metrics, which showcases from the beginning of that goal being set till date, how has the district been progressing month over month or year over year? Are we progressing on the right direction or are we going down? So it helps the superintendent identify specific goals which probably are doing well, and more importantly, which are not doing so well. So it quickly helps the superintendent understand, okay, this is my problem area. This is what I need to tackle, and they can contact whomever they need to try and improve that particular area. So if you can see from a 50,000 feet view on the page 1, we have gone directly into goals and strategies, which within 2 clicks, they are able to identify areas that are doing well, and more importantly, the areas where they are having issues with and where they need to pay attention to get it better. Also, if you see, there is a button called actions. We not only showcase the actions that the school district take, not only the outcomes, but also the actions that they have taken. So if they select a particular goal and they click on actions and services, they can compare the outcome versus the amount of effort that the school district has put in. So again, narrowing down, being able to narrow down to where exactly the problem area is. Okay. Dan, we can go to the next slide, please. So now we are going to talk about a principal dashboard. A principal dashboard typically represents the middle level manager that I spoke to you about earlier. They report to the superintendent or the central office CXOs, but they have teachers who are taking care of operational things. So they form the middle level, perfect middle level user. And if you look at their responsibilities, they need to take care of the operational health of the school. They need to supervise, monitor, and coach the staff for the continuous improvement. They need to ensure that the students are continuously improving in terms of their achievement. And they also need to effectively manage the school operations, which includes the bus services, the food services, etc. So again, this is a page for a principal, the same at a glance page. So you can see how different this page is compared to the at a glance page of the superintendent. We are making this so fine-tuned for the principal. The core data of both these dashboards are the same, but if you look at it, the amount of details that we are showing out here is so different, but at the same time, this is what a principal needs. Now, over here, we have, again, multiple areas. We have attendance, we have behavior data, we have student performance data, so the user can look at anything. And over here, we are not just showing one KPI that we would have shown for superintendent. We are showing multiple metrics for the principal, because they would have to go to the bottom to identify the issue and sort it out. And for every KPI, we have a daily level reporting for the principal to know what is happening today, what happened yesterday, what happened over the past week. Is the trend on a positive or a negative direction? Do I need to do anything to reverse the direction? So that is more importantly available out here. Again, school is a composition of multiple grade levels. So we have the data broken down by grade levels. And then finally, the principal can click on any particular day or any particular grade level. And we have the list of teachers and students available out here. So the principal can go down to a teacher level or to a student level to look at their data. For example, they want to look, let's say there are 20% of the students in grade 3 who are absent today against a usual of 5% of students being absent. So the principal notices a trend on the bar charts that you see. They click on the day, and then the list on the right hand side would show the students and the teachers who are absent on that particular day. And for all those students who are absent, it will also show the statistics for the student. So the principal can identify whether it is an aberration or whether it is something that a continuous thing where he or she needs to have an intervention for the student, meet with the parents to see what the problem is. So if you look at it, even though both superintendent dashboard and the principal dashboard are taking the user to the lowest level, the level that we take them are completely different, and they are very, very closely bound to the role that they play. So we are trying to provide the data that they look for at their fingertips within a single click. The next page is again a staff page. Sorry, Dan, can you go back? I'll just talk about the second page. Yeah, the screenshot that you see on the right is for the staff. Again, one of the roles, if you see, is managing the staff operations. So the principal can click on any staff. We provide all the performance indicators for the staff, including their overview. So the principal can coach the staff better or understand who are doing well, and then always assign substitutes if there are certain absenteeism. One of the typical use cases is there are, let's say, 10 teachers who are absent on that particular day. The principal can click on that staff, look at the competencies of that particular staff, and it also provides a list of substitutes that the principal can use on the same page along with their competencies, and then they can assign. So from analytics to action in one single smooth step is what we do. We can go to the next slide, Dan.
Okay, and just a time check, Barath. We have to move on to the next, but yep.
Yeah, sure. So this is the last level of user, which is the role of a team lead. I mean, we are impersonating over here with a teacher. They are very, very operational. They need to know for day-to-day activities. So again, similar at a glance, but over here we provide notifications on what they need to do if a student is absent, there is a misbehavior, there is an assignment due, all those things kind of details are provided out here. We also provide a class schedule and the assignments that are due. And on the right side is the student progress monitoring view. Goes down to the student level. It provides all the statistics around the student for that particular course and overall for the teacher to know how well their students are doing. So yeah, that's the different how we approach our dashboarding and the different levels of data that we present. Which gives the user a very good user experience. And we also try to include different kinds of UI elements, which makes the dashboard pleasant to look at and easily able to identify the details that they need to. I'll pause here for any questions. Dan, you can take it forward from here.
Yeah, and Barath, I would mention to everyone, why don't you just quickly mention that you have a creative person on staff that's their whole purpose, is to make sure it's beautiful interface. So do you want to just make sure that everyone understands that?
Yeah. So I usually work with, we have a team of UX experts. So we from business side of our organization work with the user experience team, and that's how the magic appears that you see on the screen. They know how well to position things. They understand the user behavior, and accordingly they place the data, and they set the navigations for the page. They use the coloring schemes, the fonts. All those things are decided by a user experience team, and they typically come up with the screens that you have seen so far.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on just for time, but if you have any questions, go right ahead.
Yeah, this is Jared. I was just going to say, I do like the example you used. I mean, certainly everybody can relate to, the education scenario, and just want to enforce, you definitely don't have to have like one report that serves all purposes. This is a perfect, illustration of, some of the same data presented to different personas. That suits their needs. I think a lot of times, developers think, well, let me build a report that has everything, but then it becomes less usable if the audience that's consuming it isn't going to need all those aspects of data. So yeah, that's definitely a great example.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. We have another use case example working with a customer. Sanjay, do you want to give a brief overview?
Sure. So that was, I think, as you saw earlier, how UX and UI plays a very critical role in delivering dashboard to the users, right? Here, I would like to share with you one of the report that we built for our customer, one of our engineering customer, where they used to use, they were using SSRS report. They had like 50 plus SSR reports for their operations dashboard. And they were pulling that data from their ERP package, one on cloud and one on on-premise and so on. And we kind of helped them modernize their data platform. So we took that, we built a Azure data warehouse and build this operations dashboard. It was just a one report, Power BI report, which kind of we took those 50 reports into one report with the 10 different pages, right? And wanted to just, while not getting into the data side of the business, since we're talking more about UX and UI. So our approach of building this UX and UI was that we understood all the KPIs that they want to monitor. We created a storyboard which saying who wants to monitor what based on roles, right? So they have sector leaders, market leaders, and what KPI metric they want to see. And we created, based on that, we built a story, and then we created the mock-up, the wireframe first. And then wireframe, that was once it was accepted, it turned into visual using a Figma prototyping tool. And we built a prototype, working prototype with the navigation. So the user can really see that experience, how it's going to be when it's ready with the real data, right? Once that was done, then we had a development team go in and build this beautiful looking dashboard. As part of that, as you can see that we created a theme based on customers branding. We created a template. We use that and build a navigation within that template, and created all different visuals which are more relevant and showing them like they want to compare against goals. So even that one custom visual that you see for total sales, that's showing them multiple things like how are they doing against their goal and how is the sales trending over the period and so on. So we use the right visuals for that. And what you see on the top, like the company sector, they are all the individual pages. So there was a navigation depending upon the role base. They could see only certain tabs that they have access to, right? And they could see different metrics and get more details about that. Now, so the idea was that on a company page, the key information that Barath mentioned about the strategic KPI that they want to monitor, that were presented here. So executives can go in here and they can get all the information about the health of their business very quickly. And then for operational and for technical, they could go into other detail level pages and get that information. One other thing also, they wanted to see the same data on the mobile. So we kind of created the mobile version of this report as well, so they could see it on the report. Just to summarize this, there were about 200 users who were using this SSR report. When converted into Power BI report, they could get this on mobile as well as on their laptop. And one of the feedback we received from one of the users who have been using actively the SSI report, he said this has really saved them in a huge amount of time. What they used to spend for 8 hours a day in a week, it cut down to literally 5 minutes, where he could go in and within 3 clicks, he could see all the data set. He could use it as a live dashboard in the meetings versus before it was taking the data, putting into Excel and creating a PowerPoint and things like that. So it was a very successful project. But I think the key I wanted to bring out here is our approach of building that user experience and then creating the user interface. And as part of that, I think one thing I would like to add, when we created this report, we created leveraged best practices in terms of building the data flow from the data warehouse and then building data set and then build report on top of it. So as part of that, we enable that self-service also for the users. So if users, some power user wants to build their own report from the data flow, they could do that as well. Over to you, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're trying to just we're trying to give everybody kind of a broad understanding of different ways of representing data. Now I'm going to show you one example here where this is a unified portal written in React, but Power BI is embedded inside of it. And the whole purpose of this is to create a place where users can come into and based on their needs get served up information, some from Power BI, some from just data sources, and present it. So this is an example of an airport application, and the portal would be really the user would come in and log in, and based on their security, they would have access to certain types of information. But notice on here we put the KPIs right on the front page, the KPIs that they care about, right? This is a particular example of an airport, and they care about departures, arrivals, and how many passengers. Over on the left, we have widgets that identify different subject areas. So executive or concessions or flight operations, big, bold, easy to understand, and just a nice color scheme. And then of course the airport in the background is kind of subtly there with passengers walking. So for instance, now you'll see the combination here where we're using Power BI and our own widgets that just, open source React. Here is an example where this data can be represented using open source technology. And this gives, for the executive, gives key subject areas, like passenger traffic, concessions, and just key metrics, a nice infograph, and then just a kind of a way of showing time and, and kind of wait times, and then passenger volume, then parking revenue and transactions and then financial. But you'll notice each one of these sections, we have very specific metrics that the user who is looking at passengers cares about. And it's in a nice, easy to understand way. Now you'll notice down here, it says powered by Power BI. So we also have the ability of going over to the menu and offering the users the ability to look at all sorts of dashboards from Power BI. And so different subject areas here, we've created the menu structure. And for instance, if I take concessions and I want to look at concession search, now I'm going to open up Power BI, and embedded inside this portal, we now have the ability to present data related to concessions. And everybody knows Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, and well, a lot of these, all of these airports, that's how a lot of the revenue is made through the concessions. And so this is an example of listing using standard Power BI functionality and listing some of the metrics about the concessions, and then over here just layering in just different visuals to show where the store is in a particular part of, part of the terminal. And so I clicked on Starbucks, and then over here it labels, where that particular location is. So just an example of giving users the ability not only just to navigate Power BI, but sometimes a unified portal is required, where you may have Tableau and Power BI within a company, and you need data to come to a single place and be served up to the users. Well, this is an example of that. And this is becoming more common as users we have Click and Power BI and Looker and ThoughtSpot, and we're seeing all these convergence of these tools, and the customers are not just going with one tool. So anyway, this is an example of that. Another example I have is using Power BI, and this is an example of an HR dashboard that we created, and using an extension. And so this is standard Power BI, but we're choosing to put in some of the key metrics using the infograph, to kind of attrition, and we're just trying to come up with little icons for calling out that particular area. It just makes, and then big, bold KPIs with some sort of an indicator of trending. Is it up? Is it down from prior what? What period? And the user could select what period up here. But this is an example of taking a standard Power BI application and putting a different type of user interface on the front of it. And then as you click into some of these areas, it drills down, and then it opens up, further Power BI reports, and and it takes the user down something that people are more familiar with. But that's just an example of putting a face on the dashboard so that it's a lot easier to navigate the data. And then the user can click on any one of these subject areas and be taken on a journey into that. But from an HR perspective, they can get everything in a consolidated view. So we are at 6:45. The only other thing I wanted to point out is, for more advanced clients, we talked about prototyping. And one of the tools that UX designers use are prototyping tools like Figma, and there's a couple other ones. Adobe has a product as well. I want to show you an example of a prototyping tool called Figma, and this is a prototyping dashboard. There's nothing behind this. It's purely a prototyping tool, but yet you can actually create the entire user experience a lot faster than Power BI. And you do it in a tool like this, and then you can sit down with the users and say, is this what we're thinking? So this prototyping tool is fully interactive. I can click on it, and for instance, I clicked on service availability. I can click on it, and I can actually see further details about it. And I can take the user on a journey and say, okay, you come to this portal, and you click on service availability, and now all of a sudden we can look at it geospatially. This is all prototyping. There's no substance behind this. And the prototyping tools allow you to create this stuff really quickly and then sit down with the users. Now, it does require more advanced capabilities. If you're one or two people trying to respond to all the needs in a company, you're going to need someone who has specialty in this tool. But if you're thinking long term and you say, what, we really want to build an organization that is much more user experience and UI focused, then prototyping is definitely part of the long-term solution. These tools are fantastic, and Barath uses them all the time. He even mentioned, they'll build these prototypes for instance, a school district before they even build the actual final dashboards. They build it all in this type of a tool. It's fully interactive. I can look at geospatial. I can look at detail view. I can look at a Sankey chart, which is something you can do in the prototyping tool. And then when you sit down with the user, you can let them see and see if this meets their needs. So I just wanted to mention that. prototyping is definitely a mega trend, and you will see it come up more and more. And Figma is one of the leading tools for that particular example. So I'm going to pause here. We do have another couple examples, but I'll I'll basically pause here and see if anybody has any questions, and then I'll wrap it up. Does anybody have any tips on UX, UI design and best practices that you've seen work that would be worth sharing with the group? All right, well, just I'll wrap up here, but just fire away if you have anything. So 2 things. I already talked about the prototyping. The 3 tools are Figma, Just in Mind, and Adobe XD. The other thing is there is no substitute for spending time with users. And so this picture here just depicts, just sitting down with users and spending an hour just, trying to be in their shoes and live their life. There's no substitute for that. It builds the relationship, it builds the trust, it helps you understand, what's going on in the user's world. It gives you feedback, and it creates an iterative loop. And that's all part of the UX. The user experience is how easy are you to work with? So when a user looks at this developer here, is it a good experience or is it a bad experience? And the time we spend with users is the best way to make sure that the user experience is improving and is always good.
So just to point out, I don't know if you saw, Alan had asked a question. How do you integrate your design best practices into a company that has a culture or history of doing things a specific way? For instance, color schemes, familiarity with certain visuals like pie charts. I think, we see this all the time, but, Dan, do you want to take a pass?
Sure. I mean, one of the things, right, is talking about new ideas is one thing, but showing new ideas is a more effective way, at least what we've found. So in a case where you may have some ideas for improving the user interface, but let's say people are stuck on, this is the way we've always done it, pie charts, and, I just like it that way, and that's fine. But as new opportunities come along, right, to create new visuals, that's where either prototyping in the actual tool, like Power BI, or if you were, you had the skill sets to in a mock-up tool, that's the best way, is to put actual new visualizations that are useful to the end user in front of people, and you do that enough, and you add enough value with those visuals, people will embrace them. It may take time, but if you have a really good way of getting answers, because remember, that's our job. Our number one job is to create useful dashboards. And so if you create useful dashboards and you use new ideas, that's the best way, is to just start doing it and just presenting it.
I'll probably add to what Dan had just said. So in the way we approach it, we usually create templates. What you see on the screen is a template which is generic in nature. But when we work with specific customers or clients, the same template would be used, but it may look completely different based on the themes that those particular customer would be using. Typically, every organization has their own UX standards, UI standards in terms of color themes, in terms of fonts, even in terms of the type of charts they use. So though we have our recommendations, we try to align with the standards that every organization has for themselves, and we switch. But what we don't compromise on is the data that is needed for the role, the flow of the data. So we can change a few metrics here and there. We always have a 80-20 principle, where 80% is kind of fixed, and 20% is the customization that we do from an industry specific dashboard to a customer within that industry specific dashboard. So every organization has their own nitty-gritties, and we try to fit those nitty-gritties into the dashboard, be it the color scheme, be it the fonts, or be it the content in terms of charts and the metrics that we show.
I'll add one element to that as well, because Alan, this is definitely a great question and something that's come up a lot. Sometimes there's resistance to change too. So depending on the group of folks and what they're accustomed to. I mean, maybe it's Excel, right? So we've done certain projects where you maybe start with something that's familiar, and then, as Dan mentioned, you start to introduce some of the newer concepts, let them see the value, get excited about it. Next thing you know, they're suggesting some new features, or what if it could do this? So I think sometimes there can be an evolution, especially with certain end user groups. But yeah, good question.
Yeah, excellent question. Sorry, I couldn't see any. I can't see any questions because my full screen is
That's all right. We got you.
If there's any other.
Actually, just to add what Jared mentioned, I just want to share another story as well. So we had a customer where the culture was very different. They just wanted to see everything tables, right? They want to see in the report. We call it dashboard, but it's showing all the tables and straight tables with all the numbers. And it took a while. That required a transformation, right? If we are talking about UI, UX, it does require transformation. So we really had to work with that customer. And first, as Dan and Jared were saying about showing them something, showing them start with something which is more visual but easy to use, right? And at BlueOrbit, we created we call it 3-click concept, so that any question that the customer have or user have, within 3 clicks, they should be able to get that answer there. And we build that kind of stories with them, and then eventually they kind of said, okay, no, this is good. While we have, we can see the data in tabular form, but I would like to start with the visual first, and then if needed to go into tabular. So it does require some time. It does require convincing. The only way it can happen is you show them and educate them, and have not only just depend on one person's response, but bring the team into it. Get other users involved and do a survey and find out which they find it easier to use and easier to work with, and you will see eventually it will change.
Okay, just in the interest of time, I believe it's 7 o'clock we stop. So I just want to finish our piece up, and then there's some resources when we send this document out. These are resources on building good dashboards and good principles. And then these are resources on UX design. 2 free courses, one from Accenture and one from Coursera. And then Nielsen Norman Group has a lot of great materials on UX. And then Apple actually publishes guidelines for human interface, designing good human interfaces. So all good resources, and then the 3 prototyping tools are here if you have any interest in those. So that's all we have. Thank you very much. We'll make sure if you guys want to get a hold of us, we'll make sure our emails are available, all 3 of us, and let us know if we can help or you have any questions. But thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, guys. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up?
All right. Definitely a few other comments there. Great thoughts. All thanks. Great user group. Thanks for that. Natasha, was it you? And give a thumbs up if it was, that was asking about the goals preview feature.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I can follow up, because we'll reach out to some folks on the Microsoft side, see if we can get any insight. Every now and then they talk about internal roadmap, but hopefully.
Oh, that'd be great.
Actually, I don't know if I have your email, so I'll put mine in the chat. And Gina.
Oh, Jared, sorry, I did. I put mine too. We have a few people that I didn't see on our registration list through Eventbrite, so I wanted to see if you guys could shoot me an email, just say hi, just to make sure that we can get the recording out to you as well.
Good call, Gina. Anybody, any other questions before we close out? All right. Well, thanks everybody, and definitely another round for the folks at BlueOrbit. Great presentation today, very insightful, and look forward to some more opportunities to collaborate in the future. Again, we're always looking for topics for the next PUG. I don't know if we have I don't think we have a date yet, but a couple months from now.
Yeah, something in March.
It will have some updates from all those exciting March updates that are scheduled, and looking forward to that.
Thank you, Gina and Jared, for giving us the opportunity.
Thanks.
Of course. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.